All right, we are on Solomon part 8. It's the final week of the study, and it's on the book, the Song of Solomon. And the book that we now know of as the Song of Solomon takes its name from the Song of Songs, which literally is Solomon, Song of Solomon, chapter 1, verse 1. Interestingly enough, the Hebrew language points to this being the best of the 1,005 songs that Solomon wrote. In 1 Kings chapter 4:32, it points out that he wrote 1,005 songs. Why 1,005? You stop at 1,000. Why? I mean, really, that's a weird number to record in my head. But anyway, so they're thinking that this probably is one of those songs, or perhaps it's the greatest of all songs. And there's a lot of controversy around this book. And so we're going to be talking about some of that today. There's a great range of opinion as to the author of the book. First of all, Solomon is typically generally credited with writing the book. And there's several reasons to believe that it was from Solomon, such as there's the frequent use of Aramaic forms and words and the presence of names of foreign products, which would tell you that that was the language that it would have been written in. Secondly, there's a Persian word. There's also a Greek word in there that's taken as evidence of a late date of authorship. However, if you think about Solomon and during Solomon's reign, his trading relationships were everywhere. He traded around the entire world, right? His relationships were far and wide. He had extensive commerce and diplomatic relationships. So the presence of foreign words for articles that had been imported or imitated from foreign sources, that would be expected. You would expect to find that in that. I'm trying to think of words in our language that are really technically not English words that have been foreign and imported from foreign places. Feliz Navidad, okay, that's a good one. How about Honda, Toyota, Kia? I mean, all of those become words in our language. Say again. Those French words, okay, great, yeah. Those are perfect examples of that. Words that, that we use, that we say, oh, that's English. Well, that's the way we pronounce it in English, but that word is not from the deep root of English language, okay? I'm going to go down a path here. I'm going to get myself in trouble. However, so those are to be expected. Now, the book itself says that the authorship is Solomon, and it has relationships, Proverbs, and Ecclesiastes as well. And if you think about it, the author's knowledge, Solomon's knowledge and acquaintance with plants and animals, 1 Kings chapter 4, verse 33, talks about everything that he was aware of and he knew. And then there's also in chapter 1, verse 9 in the Song of Solomon, there's a line in there called a mare of Pharaoh's chariots. And it's a line that talks about really Solomon's horse trading with Egypt as well as his marriage to Pharaoh's daughter. So these are all things that point to the fact that probably Solomon truly is the author. It may not be in its original form the way he wrote it, but he more than likely had most of the content. The lover is called the king. There are other indications of his royal interest as well as other mentions of Solomon by name. And the names of places and different points and ranges of places throughout Palestine, it fits well with the kingdom that Solomon was in charge of prior to being divided. Because after the division, then names started changing and places weren't what they were before. Okay? So that kind of tells us, kind of gives us an idea of date and authorship. There's no other definitive, oh yeah, it was written in, 480 BC or whatever. There's no other definitive times like that. The style and interpretation, well, the Song of Solomon is a series of what they call lyrical poems. And these are on the theme of love between man and woman, okay? And the poems are full of images from the countryside. The time, appropriately, is the spring. We have a saying here, right? When springtime rolls around, a young man's fancy turns to the perfumes, right? Twitter-pated. That's great. That's a good one, yeah. The poem themselves are very hard to analyze and to interpret exactly, and for this reason they've been subject to all kinds of interpretations. And I want to talk a little bit about that today, because I think it makes a big difference how you interpret it as to then how you read it and how you use that book. Okay? First of all, Jews and Christians down through the ages have used them as allegories. Okay? An allegory is a definition or a different definition or a different picture of something. Okay? And in this particular case, an allegory is a type. In other words, they're saying that this book is really a type of a picture of God's love for Israel and of Christ's love for his bride, the church. The poem themselves give no evidence of having originally been written for that purpose. Okay? Some see the poems as a drama, and it has 2 or 3 characters. Most will agree there's 3 characters in there. There's the bride, and then there's the royal bridegroom, or Solomon, okay, and the bride's shepherd lover. Okay? There's no evidence in Jewish culture and literature that this type of literature existed other than the song itself. In other words, this is the only example of this type that we have. This is it, okay? Others regard the poems as just a series of songs that are sung during the week-long wedding feast. And this happens still in Syria today and places like that, where the bride and the groom are crowned king and queen, and so they're treated that way, and their weddings are a week long. Those of us that have daughters, aren't we glad we don't do week-long weddings? Praise the Lord. Amen. Okay? The natural approach is simply to take the song as it stands. It explores the feelings, the hopes, the fears, and the passions of a man and a woman. This particular commentator says it can be seen as filling out the first ever love poem, which would have been the words of Adam to Eve in Genesis 2:23. And I want to go there because Genesis 2:23. Remember, this is Adam's first words after God brings him his helper, right? Okay? And the man said, "This is now bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, for she was taken out of man." And that is why a man leaves his father and mother and is united to his wife, and they become one flesh. So literally, if you think about that, that gives us an amazing picture through this particular book of the fulfillment of that. The song concentrates on the relationship between a man and a woman within the confines of marriage, the enjoyment of each other, the theme of commitment that is central to the whole Bible and to the whole relationship. It's therefore completely in line with the biblical view from Genesis on, although it stands alone as the one and only book that focuses on this theme. And that's the relationship between man and woman, okay? If you look at it that way. Now, there was like a ton of information out there on why this book shouldn't be in the Bible. And I didn't want to go down that path because that's not really our place to say per se. People who are a whole lot smarter than us and they use $20 words a lot have figured that out over the years. My job is just to look at it and say, okay, how do we understand it better from there? So let's talk about love poetry. I mean, I was doing this lesson and I was thinking, it made me think back a lot to like when I was dating Kim and those things like that. And I didn't do love poetry. I mean, that wasn't my thing. Do we have any poets here that wrote poetry to their wives or whatever, their future wives? Maybe somebody you don't want your future wife. I mean, somebody before your future wife.
I think I wrote a poem.
Yes, or husbands. Thank you, Aaron. Sorry, go ahead.
I wrote a poem to Lisa, I think for our 5th wedding anniversary.
Really?
And framed it and gave it to her.
Oh, yeah. Right now, Lisa, the wheels are turning. Lisa's going, I have no idea where that thing is at. So the frame caught her attention more than the poem. Well, the Song of Solomon is clearly love poetry. It's a genre that's known around the world, and especially in the ancient Near East. Now, the ancient Near East had its own unique take on poetry. And this is somewhat like that, but not completely. So characteristically, the lovers in the Song of Solomon use the words to and do, tu/du, okay? It's a form of address which in the English language we've lost that. But in the French and the German, it still stays very, very close. If the closest thing that I could find in our language that would still make sense is thee and thou. In other words, the two words are so close together that most of the letters match, as opposed to me and you, or boy and girl, or husband and wife. I mean, very few of those match together, right? So that's a very intimate form of address. Secondly, there are familiar seek and find and hazards to overcome themes. I kind of wish that I had been a Christian before I got married and had read this and understood some of these things, because it would have helped me through the first umpteen years of our marriage, okay? But it is what it is. Physical beauty is celebrated with elaborate imagery, typically from nature. And then lastly is the senses are what gets talked about a lot. Sight, sound, smell, and touch are used throughout this particular book. Now, unlike Near Eastern love poetry, there is no connection in the Song of Solomon to any cult or religion. And I never caught this before, never thought about this. The song uses none of the words of Israel's religion and worship. Nowhere in there does it talk about God. Nowhere in there does it talk about the church, the nation, the chosen one. None of that is used throughout that, okay? But I could also say neither does jealousy or infidelity appear in the poem, in this particular poems, as it does in so many others, okay? So it's not just the missing of the religion and the worship. And there's other things in there. So the structure of the book is another one that most scholars agree upon. It's kind of divided up into 5 sections. Chapter 1, verse 2 through chapter 2:7, it's called Anticipation. Chapter 2, verse 8 through 3:5 is Found and Lost and Found Again. Okay? 3:6 through 5:1 is called Consummation. 5:2 through 8:4 is called Lost and Found. Gee, that ring a theme through any of our marriages? How many times we had arguments and discussions and then we're apart, but we come back together, and so on and so forth. And then chapter 8, verse 5 through verses 14, Affirmation. Okay? And so I want to give kind of a rough breakdown, like I have of the last couple of books that we've looked at. So in chapter 1, we have the bride, who is a country girl, speaks first, partly to her lover, partly to the women of Jerusalem, who is probably the court or the harem around her, who served as kind of a chorus throughout the rest of this book. They're going to be kind of the chorus that goes back and forth. And then the bride and groom have a little discussion there in chapter 1. Chapter 2, there's these compliments that get exchanged, compliment for compliment, right, between the bride and the groom. And the bride's thoughts dwell on her lover with longing, thrilling at his voice or the memory of his words. The bridegroom calls to her in the beauty of springtime. It's all done in a country setting. So I'm reading this and I'm writing this and I'm putting this together, and I don't know if it's weird or not, I'm like, oh yeah, back in the days, you're on the phone and you're pull the chair up next to the phone because you didn't have the wire, there wasn't Wi-Fi. You had the cord. Kim had one of them long cords on her so she could stretch it across the kitchen and be kind of, out of the way or whatever. But you spent time on the phone. You called back and forth. She was. I met Kim when we met at McDonald's in Wentzville when it was first built. She was the drive-through girl. I was the maintenance guy. She had the cleanest drive-through pad in the entire company. I spent a lot of time maintaining that drive-through pad so I could, on Saturdays and Sundays, so she'd lean out that little drive-through window and we could have a little chat, right? And then when we started dating, it was on the phone, or it was I'll be there to pick you up, or whatever. And so you think about that, and you begin to think about those kinds of things back then. You couldn't spend time, you didn't want to spend time apart. You wanted to spend time together, right? And now, and then I fast forward 40 plus years. You guys are all chuckling because fast forward 40 years, and she says, I take a day off and I spend the day, and we spend the day together. And she says, now if this is what retirement's going to be like, this ain't going to work. I ain't getting nothing done. Okay. All right. Amazing how that changes, right? But in this particular book, it's all done in a country setting, and they're spending time out in nature. We move on to chapter 3, and what we find is the search and find motif is introduced through this dream sequence as the bride describes the distress of separation and the joy of reunion. I can remember having those conversations. Yeah, I thought about you. Yeah, I thought about you too. But I thought about you more. I don't know. I might have thought about you more. Okay? Chapter 4, the bridegroom glories in the beauty of his bride. The imagery that is given through this chapter 4 is really, really an oriental type picture. The girl's eyes are shy and soft as doves. Her hair shining silky black like the coat of a flock of goats caught in the sun as they ripple over the hillside. I'm like, yeah, that's definitely not American. There ain't no way, right? Let's see. Let me bring that to, let's see. Your hair is as black as that shiny enameled coat of paint that's on my 67 Camaro. Look how smooth it is, right? That's how your hair is, just like that. Yeah, I mean, that would have been, that's how the guys today would have wrote that. Although today it would have been more like, no, it's as
Shiny as my computer screen.
yeah. Yeah, we could go down a lot of paths there, but anyway, those were the visions that I had as I read through it, okay? Do what? I thought you had a little heat going on over there, Jim. Becky's not here today, so he's like, I'm missing you, honey. It's the nature of love the world over to consider every detail of the body with delight. In the bridegroom's eyes, the beauty of the woman that he loves is flawless. Now think about that for a minute. Guys, we're going to get this. Ladies, you're not, okay? To a guy, it's not about, oh, I got two hairs out of place, or, oh, I don't, one eye's a little bigger than the other eye. We never see that. We don't see that. Or that, oh, I'm a little overweight, or we don't see that. Okay? I know you ladies do, and we try and be the good guys. But if I better not go down that path. I see Kim's carrying stuff in. I'm going to get myself in trouble here. But literally, when I read this, I was like, that very much describes a guy. When he's dating, when he's looking at his bride, his wife, after 40 plus years, same thing. I don't see the wrinkles. I don't see the age. I don't, okay? The beauty of the woman he loves is flawless. And he finishes it by saying, she has stolen his heart, fired his senses, and he longs to have her for his own. Yeah, I remember those days. Now, quit taking the covers. Quit flopping around. Okay? I mean, you guys think about that. Don't sit in my chair, right? Those are the things the bridegroom thinks about today. This is going to be online. I'm going to be in deep. I can hear we're going to get some conversation going with the online folks about this. Yeah, it's liable to be.
When's supper going to be ready?
Yeah. You know what? That is typically not a big me thing. All right. Yeah, no, that's okay. No, I got you. But you're right. That's probably a typical guy thing. And part of that, I think, is our generation. That was our generation. As we go to work, we come home, it's time for supper. I'm ready to go. Okay, chapter 5 moves on. The bride, we move back from the bridegroom back to the bride. She dreams again. This time, she dreams that the bridegroom comes, and although everything's ready to go, she's too slow letting him in. And once again, the enjoyment of love is frustrated. Her eager anticipation turns to this deep sense of loss, and she replies to her women, her harem, her friends, with a description of her lover. And she says, she begs them to go find him, to tell her that she's faint with love for him, that he's as desirable to her as she is to him from head to foot. Now, I think back to that, and I think about, when you're dating, there's a lot of things that you don't do that are normal for you while you're dating until afterwards, until after you're married, okay? You begin to find out, oh, he's got ugly toes. Oh, he's got hair on his back. Crazy things like that, right? But in this particular setting, she says he's as desirable to her as she is to him from head to foot. He moves on then to chapter 6, and the women question, and the bride replies, and then the bridegroom again describes the beauty of his one and only love. Chapter 7, she moves on, and the bridegroom marvels at the beauty of his bride again. He cannot tear his eyes away. Every detail is perfection. His mind and his senses leap at the moment of possession. Think about that. For those of us, married in church or wherever you were married, that time you got to stand here and watch as they opened the doors and she stepped in, and you got to see her in her outfit for the first time, right? The bride loves him utterly, without reserve, longing to give herself to him in all the glory of springtime, right? She wants everything to be perfect on that day. And then chapter 8, the bride longs to take the initiative and to display her affection openly. In her mind, her lover's arms are already around her. And then at verse 5 in chapter 8, the scene kind of changes, okay? And we see that the two are together at last. Love has found its fulfillment. Nothing can destroy true love. The final invitation is to a continued celebration of the love and the communion which the happy couple shares. So we get the entire picture from start to finish of that process of finding your love, working those things out, and then staying faithful to that love throughout time. Again, we can go back to the allegory of God. God loves us from head to toe, even in all of our wickedness, right? God loves His church from head to toe, even in all of its pettiness sometimes, right? And it's a love that will go on forever. He will stay faithful forever. Okay, this gives us a good overview of the book. I'm going to kind of stop there and see if we got questions. Sure.
I find it highly amusing that Solomon, the presumed author, is professing his faithfulness and love for his one and only love. How many wives and concubines did he end up with?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's, you really, if you go digging into that real deep and trying to figure that all out, it hurts your head to think about that. It really hurts your head how that must have worked. But again, in his mind, most of that had to do with, I need to make a pact with Egypt, so I'll make that one my wife. I need to make a pact with this country, I'll do that. It wasn't this is the love of my life. But you're right, it is interesting that Solomon would be the one in all of that to do that. Any other thoughts or comments?
Well, I can relate to what you're saying, but when I see him, I mean, I know he's got the white hair and everything, but I don't see him that way. I see him with the dark hair, like he was when we first met.
Mm-hmm.
That's how I see him.
Yeah.
But sometimes I'll see a picture and go, whoa, when did that happen?
Whoa, when did that happen?
When I see a picture of myself.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to remember exactly how I read something about, man, I hate it when I have the opportunity to visit with an older person. And then as we're chatting, I realize we went to school together. You're kind of like, oh, yeah. And, I think there's something else. Part of it has to do with, I think, just human nature. But we've all seen people. Now, I don't do the big class reunions or anything, but I am friends with several through Facebook, so I get the opportunity to see them. And you see an individual and you think, holy smokes, they were rode hard and put up wet. You know, what kind of a life have they had? Some of it's just in our DNA. I'm not going to get away from this. I have pictures of my grandfather and great-grandfather. This is a Zellner all over, you know. I did manage to keep most of it longer than most. I had a cousin who by 16 was that, you know. So some of it's in our DNA, but some of it is in the life that we live and how we lead that life. But I agree, you know, those that you're close to, you don't see that. I had lunch this past week with Isaiah Burridge. He's doing really well, by the way. He looks good. He feels good. I don't know if many of you knew he's still dealing with an issue with the heart. They still can't figure out why his heart got all out of rhythm and all messed up, but they're working on it. But he's doing really well. And we were chatting about seeing people that, you know, he remembers when he was a kid who were like the leaders of the church back then. And as you get older and you get that little saggy skin and the hair gets colored. Yeah, the waddle. Yeah, and that. And then also how sometimes when you don't see people for a little bit of a while, you see that huge change. Kendall just this morning was saying you got a chance to go see your dad this week. And that, man, it's a lot of change there since the last time you saw him. So I think we can all see that. Like I said, it's part of the aging process. And I don't know about you, but I don't feel any different inside. Obviously, your dad doesn't, because he said, well, I'm going to do one last repair. I'm going to get up on the roof and take care of that. He's walking with a cane like Wayne, you know? Yeah, so inside you don't feel that way. But the body, the vessel that we are in, does. Okay.
So hard to see your friends who are struggling to move and can't think right. You're like,
Why do they call it the golden years?
I had the opportunity, the blessing, to take Gloria to lunch yesterday.
Oh, good.
7 years old. Just she and I, Rick and Linda wanted a minute to, they were doing yard work.
Yeah.
And just, you know, struggle to get in and out of my vehicle, you know.
Yeah.
I have a step stool because I have a truck, but I have the running boards on it, but just don't fall on the
Yeah.
curb, you know. But yeah, we had a wonderful lunch and she wears out very quickly.
Well, I know she's been faithful. She's been here every Sunday, and good, and she's excited about being here. But yeah, you can tell by the end of by the trek from that chair out, she's whipped. Yeah, aren't we all? Yeah, that's right. That's right.
see, but then I think of the Bible verse that specifically says, although Moses was 120 years old when he died, his eyesight was not dimmed, nor his vigor abated. And I'm standing on that verse for me.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
it's part of getting old. I'm not going to agree to that. I'm going to say Moses' eyesight was not dimmed.
Yeah.
Nor was his vigor abated.
yeah.
It's possible.
Yeah. Well, and we all know somebody that's that way that is still up and getting around. So I'll tell you this story. There's a Middletown Christian Church, Rod Allison, I can't remember his wife's name. Her mom, no, it'd be Rod's mom, turned 100 last Sunday. And so they had a big birthday party for her. She was all excited. And Tuesday or Wednesday, I can't remember which day, she wanted to go to Columbia because there was some kind of an air squadron there, and it was a particular plane that her husband flew during World War II. And she wanted to go see this and get the tour of it and understand it. And they took her up there, and she spent the day, got to see what she wanted, came home, laid down, took a nap, went to be with Jesus. But I mean, just, you know, so you talk about, and at 100, she was still up and moving around. And I mean, she wasn't driving, but, you know, she was still getting around good. I've seen people that are that way, that they're just, you're right, they have that strength. I don't know what determines that in us. Look at the 100 and how old was the guy that spoke at the RNC? 98. got up and spoke, you know, I mean, he obviously has a little more. I didn't pay attention whether he had glasses on or not for his eyesight, but obviously enough of his faculties, and I believe his comment was, I'd re-enlist if I needed to take care of this country. So, great thing. All right, any other thoughts or comments?
My brother wrote me a poem one time. Roses are red, violets are blue, 99 point of view.
Did you respond? Did you respond? Let me give you a 5-line poem. One, as Lucy would say, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. All right. You guys are dismissed. It looks like the coffee and donuts are ready to go.